Hello, and welcome to the annual Giving Day for Church World Service. Super excited that you have joined us today. My name's Larry, and I'm one of the CWS staff. I'm actually coming to you from my home office in East Lansing, Michigan, and we would love to know who else is joining us. So while we're getting settled in, would love for you to put your name and where you're from in the chat, in the comments there. And would love to know who you are and who's with us today. One of the things I want to let you know up front is that you are in for a real treat today. Absolutely a real treat. So I'm glad that you're here with us for this. Our theme today is for such a time as this. And the idea is that it's of someone or something being uniquely positioned and qualified to meet the challenges that are going on around them at the time. And I think most of you are aware that the landscape for humanitarian work around the world has dramatically changed in the last few months. The needs have greatly increased, and the groups and individuals who are responding to those needs have sharply decreased. But today, as we celebrate 79 years of compassionate action and global impact for Church World Service, we believe that we are uniquely qualified and poised and prepared for such a time as this to respond to those needs. And so we're inviting you to take this time now and join us as we take a look at what's going on and how you can be a part of what's next. And in addition to that, there's something very exciting as well going on today with our Giving Day. Some dear friends of mine have generously agreed to match every dollar given on Giving Day up to $50,000. So anybody who gives today, that gift is going to be matched. So we're super excited for that and very grateful for that match going on. One of the main way that we want to share what's going on is I've invited 4 of our frontline leaders to be a part of a panel discussion with us today. And we were going to have everybody live, and then we realized these are folks from different parts of the world and time zones and stuff. And so we actually pulled together a couple days ago, real early in the morning, and had this conversation. And it is a super great conversation. And so we're going to go to that conversation, the recording of just 2 days ago, and let you listen in on that. But while that's going on, you can type questions in the chat and comments in the chat, and we'll continue to interact. So glad you're here, and let's go to that video of that conversation. Well, hello, and let me introduce you to 4 of our frontline leaders. This is going to be a treat. Each of these people have a unique perspective on our work. First, I want to introduce you to Chris Eads. Chris is the regional director for our work in Asia, and Chris is joining us from Bangkok today. Hello, Chris. Next is Mary Obiero, my dear friend, who is the senior regional advisor for our work in Africa. And Mary is joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome, Mary. Next, Zach Wogelmuth. Zach is our Director of Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery in the U.S. Zach is joining us from Pennsylvania. And Catherine Rayberg, finally. Catherine is currently our Director, our Vice President of Programs, and Catherine is joining us from New York. And welcome, Catherine. Good morning to all of you. Thanks, you guys, for joining us. I want to jump right in with a question for all of us to answer. And the question is this. This year's theme is for such a time as this. And what we're trying to do is really shine a light on ways that CWS has been uniquely prepared to respond to circumstances this past year. And so I'm wondering if you can each shine a light on at least a moment where you saw that really come alive in our work this year. And I'm going to start with Mary, if you'd want to go first, please.
Thank you, Larry. And as you say, this is such a time that things are not business as usual. And I want to highlight a project that we have just started in Nyarugusu Refugee Camp. Nyarugusu Refugee Camp is based in Western Tanzania. It has been there since 1997. And at the moment, it hosts about 150,000 refugees, most of them coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Burundi. For refugees in Africa, they live in refugee camps for a very long time. You can be in a refugee camp for 30, 40 years. And CWS Africa region have been having a very big resettlement program that have actually been resettling refugees from sub-Saharan Africa to US. And this is a program that has been there for 30 years. This project was fully funded by the federal government through PRM. Unfortunately, most recently, beginning of this year, we had shift in resettlement policies by the US government. And that meant that all the resettlement program is suspended. At the point when this program was being suspended, we had refugees who are in the airports going to get flights to go to the US. We had refugees who had been already past all the steps of resettlement, and they were in transit centers preparing to settle in the US. And just to take you a little bit back is that process can take between 2 to 6 years and is a life-saving. It is a durable pathway to refugee. So we have about 10 households of refugees from Nyarugusu refugee camp who are actually on their way to the US. And when the suspension happened, they had to get back to the refugee camp. What that means is that when a refugee is preparing to leave, they have sold all their material things. They have prepared psychologically to go to the US and start a new life. We learned about this, and we highlighted this issue with one of our donors based in Canada. This is alongside Hope, the Anglican Church of Canada. And they actually gave us resources to resettle these refugees back in the refugee camp. What this means is that they gave us resources to provide food for the time that the refugee will be getting back to World Food Program distribution bracket. They also gave us resources to do structured psychosocial support, because we are talking about 10 households that were on their way out, but we have a number, thousands of people who actually focused on being resettled every day. And for that reason, the vulnerability status of these families were at a point that we cannot explain. CWS is currently conducting structured psychosocial support sessions, and we are going to conduct about 200 of them, reaching 6,000 refugees in Nyarugusu refugee camp. I visited recently, and most of those refugees came to say, thank you so much, because we didn't know where to start. We were having anxiety, very high levels of anxiety. We had psychological trauma, and we didn't know what to do next. This lady who shared an example that he's the only family remaining in Nyarugusu refugee camp. All her family members had already been resettled. And for that reason, it is really hard for her. But CWS is doing something to support those families. And we thank Alongside Hope for supporting this initiative.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. That's so, I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it's also so reassuring to see how we've been able to pivot there and provide that support. So thank you so much. Zach, do you want to respond for how you've seen CWS be uniquely prepared to respond to things going on right now?
Thanks so much, Larry, and thanks for this opportunity. I think there's a lot of different examples that can be provided, and I think a moment that most recently stands out to me is our work following the Southern California wildfires. So, immediately after the fires, we were able to provide some temporary housing support through a partnership with Airbnb.org, and we were uniquely positioned through some of our staff in serving in leadership roles to be able to help in the coordination and establishment of a wildfire resource hub that served over 13,000, or I'm sorry, actually it was close to 12,000 families that were served, almost 13,000 families that were served. with a value of services being right around $12 million. So things from childcare to meals to financial aid, and lots of other resources that were provided directly to survivors in that moment. And so I think the way that we work within CWS and within the EPRR program is one of leading by example and collaboration. And so I think that for me is one of those moments where I saw us uniquely positioned to be able to step up and fill in gaps and to be able to really take a leadership role that helped to I would say multiply the resources that we were provided to be able to serve many more people.
Wow, I just get chills hearing that. Like, to think of how devastating and how huge the need was, and then to be able to step in quickly with that kind of response. That's very cool to hear. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate that. Catherine, would you want to jump in on this same question, how CWS has been uniquely poised recently?
Sure, Larry. Thanks to you and to everyone joining us today live and through this recording. You said it, this such a time as this, I think that theme really resonates. We are really in the midst of significant upheaval as a society in the US and internationally, with foreign assistance fundings being reduced significantly, not only from the United States, but other countries as well. Increasing xenophobia and anti-immigrant rhetoric, increasing internationally and here in the US. That's clouded our care for individuals and challenged it regardless of their immigration status. And we've experienced big funding changes here at CWS as well. When I think about this question, I think about the way CWS was founded. So we were founded almost 80 years ago when churches came together to try to alleviate suffering and promote a more just world, a world where everybody, each human being, has what they need to survive and thrive, and a world where, as our vision statement still says, everyone has food, voice, and a safe place to call home. These are really basic things. And I think what prepares us for this moment is this partnership approach that we've had since our founding that infuses all of the ways that we work. We are a highly relational organization with connections around the world, deep relationships with and commitments to individuals and communities in places like Kenya and Tanzania that Mary has spoken to. Zach talked about that when we talked about our Southern California wildfire response. And, I think another example of that here in the US lately has been our advocacy for and our strategic litigation regarding the US Refugee Admissions Program suspension that Mary talked about the impacts of in Nyarugusu camp. CWS joined with several other organizational plaintiffs and has together brought suit against the administration's actions with the USRAP. And that's just one specific example of the way that I think together we're not only providing direct service and meeting needs, but also trying to promote more just policy and hold our leaders to account, regardless of their political opinions, regardless of their policies, to say, we're really committed to making sure that individuals have what they need to thrive, and do that in partnership. So it's a tall order these days, I think, as we face so many challenges, and we know communities around the world face so many different challenges, but it's really an honor to be a part of this work at CWS.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And it's great to be reminded that, like, we've swam in these waters before in terms of advocacy and in terms of, standing for the rights of those that are being overlooked. And so this is unparalleled in terms of maybe its scope, but not in terms of our skill set. So that's great to see and be reminded of. And Chris, I'd love to hear you chime in on this question as well.
Thanks so much, Larry. And actually, it's perfect timing to be asked this question, because it was a month ago today that the earthquake struck Myanmar and Thailand and this region. In our offices here in Bangkok, we were unable to stand and we went running from our offices. But really, what that earthquake has served to illustrate is some of the challenges that we're facing, and some of the ways that CWS is responding in some really brilliant and unique ways. Some of the challenges, we're so used to US leadership when disasters like this happen. In Myanmar, we would have been used to the Bureau for Humanitarian Affairs being there straight away with funding, but with expertise, the infrastructure, the knowledge that it had in place in order to respond to massive disasters like this recent earthquake in Myanmar was no longer there. And so what was left was a much depleted UN system, which isn't being supported by the US and other nations. You know, we're in a situation now where Ireland is providing more money to respond to the earthquake than the United States is. And that's a really dangerous place for us to be in this region. But CWS responded so quickly. We were some of the first to respond because we have local partners based in Myanmar who we trust. And so we're funding from a position of trust with partners that we know because we've been there for such a long period of time. We've been in Thailand for a long period of time. We know these organizations, we trust these organizations, they come from the communities that we work with. And so we were able to release funds and to trust those organizations to respond in the best ways possible as quickly as they possibly could. And so, you know, to a massive disaster like this, CWS was there immediately, filling some of the gaps.
Oh, that's great. For those who are watching this, like this is the warm-up question, right? Like, so if you're like thinking like, okay, this is good stuff. Like, and if you're already somebody who's connected to CWS, you pat yourselves on the back. Like I'm sitting here going, wow, I'm so proud I get to be a part of these kind of responses and what we're doing. But as you're watching, you can go ahead and start typing questions that you have in the chat. We'll get to them during the live feed, but go ahead and if your questions are coming to your head, go ahead and start typing them in the chat. And if you're already saying, ooh, I better start thinking about whether or not I want to give, you can go ahead and start thinking about that as well, because you're going to get inspired reasons, I think, continuing. Chris, I'm going to continue with you with a couple of questions since we got you here. So yeah, current policy changes by a current U.S. administration has had some real dire consequences where CWS is at work, especially in Indonesia, some of our work with refugees there. And then also, like you mentioned, the response in Myanmar, those communities have been kind of abandoned by U.S. government aid. So what are some of the most pressing needs that you're seeing right now? And what is the CWS community doing to respond to those needs?
Thanks, Larry. Really great questions and two really good examples. In Indonesia, you know, if you're thinking, wow, these funding cuts, I imagine some of these programs weren't that essential. You know, you've been hearing lots of stories about buying pointless stuff in countries that people don't know exist. Well, actually, Indonesia, the programs that we had cut, that CWS had cut in Indonesia, are programs for unaccompanied refugee children, providing them with shelter. They are programs responding to women and girls who are suffering violence within their communities. They are programs providing healthcare to children. They are programs who are preventing refugees from slipping entirely into poverty in a country where they have no legal status and where the government has not signed the Refugee Convention and where no one will resettle from. Those are the programs that are being cut. And CWS is still there. And CWS is still funding those in-country partners who are providing support to refugee-led organizations who are there within refugee communities, making sure that things don't entirely fall apart. And at times it feels as if we are just sticking our finger in the dike and as if it's overwhelming. And really, it is. It's too much for us to do. And we have to work, and we are working through our partners. I've mentioned also Myanmar and the work that we're doing there. But before the earthquake in September of last year, it was Super Typhoon Yagi that ripped through Vietnam, through Cambodia, and through Myanmar. And we provided responses to our local partners in Vietnam. Um, in Myanmar, we provided responses at that point too. And this is us. This is CWS in this region because it's Asia. The countries that we work in are disaster prone. And so in this part of the world, these disasters are becoming more and more frequent. And so we're responding to displacement. We're responding to human suffering caused by these disasters, which are also caused by climate change. And so we're working with communities across Asia, responding to immediate needs, but also thinking about the future and how to provide resources to empower communities to take control of their existence and of their means for survival in this part of the world. Thanks, Larry.
Awesome. And gosh, I just hear that and I'm like, yeah, I want in. Like I want to be part of this. So folks that are listening, if you're like, hey, how do I get in on this kind of response? You're in luck. You're going to have the opportunity. There's going to be a link that you can jump in on. But yeah, gosh, I hear that, Chris, and I'm like, man, I want to be a part of that response. I think of unaccompanied refugee children in the streets of Indonesia, and I'm like, yeah, I want to help with that. And so I'm so glad there's an opportunity to help with that through CWS. Let me ask you one more question, Chris. From your perspective, you talked about those partnerships. What does it look like for us to be this big international humanitarian organization, and then to be able to partner with a local community? What's that look like? What's our approach?
Thanks, Larry. That's a really good question. What we're trying to achieve on some level is a sense of mutual aid, where we're trying to be equal partners, understanding that we will learn and are seeking knowledge from our partner and are relying upon our partner's expertise in the same way that our partner will be relying upon us. But we also appreciate the fact that we're this big, or we appear to be this big organization, and also we provide funding and we're aware of power imbalances. And so what we have to do and what CWS does very well is to understand those differences in power and to work to transfer control and power over responses and projects to our local partners. So for example, it means that we support women refugee leaders in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia who are from the Somali community responding to displacement in Malaysia. And we rely on them to design the responses that they are providing for their community. In the villages of northern Vietnam, we work with Viet Mon minority ethnic communities. And it means relying on the expertise of those communities when fighting forest fires in the mountainous regions and understanding that they've been doing this for hundreds of years and providing the resources and the support and the expertise, the connections, the relationships that we have, but relying on their local knowledge and expertise. In Cambodia, it means working with indigenous forest communities. In Thailand, it means working with the communities of the Klong Toi slum in the ports of Bangkok. It means relying on that local knowledge and expertise and seeking whenever possible to equalize power relationships.
Awesome. I love that because it's sometimes it's not just what we're doing, but it's how we're doing it. That we're doing it the way that we are. That that causes success, but also builds partnerships that we can rely on down the road. That's awesome. I appreciate that. Mary, I want to ask you a couple questions here now. CWS invests in both long-term development and disaster response in Africa. Can you share a little bit about how the communities that you work with are building resilience, not just recovering from crisis, but are actually growing stronger?
Thank you, Larry. CWS Africa works with communities that are suffering from acute vulnerability caused by climate variability. And this is repeated droughts and repeated floods. And we have always started, I think like Catherine said, we are built on the basis of providing support during crisis. We have always started with emergency response. But CWS understands very well the power of organizing communities, the power of handing over. In Africa, we say handing over the stick to the communities to take the lead. Even during the emergency response, we still train what we call community advisory committees to take charge and to take the lead on emergency response. And we move forward with that social structure as we go into early recovery and then as we start sustainable development. We take community organization very seriously. I call it social capital for CWS programming in Africa. So with these organized social structures, we have been able to take communities from emergency response to early recovery and to sustainable development. I want to share an example of Tana River County in Kenya, where we have been working since 2018. And actually we started the intervention on responding to floods. In 2021, we responded to drought within the same community. Actually, the cycle of both floods and drought are becoming more frequent and they're lasting longer. So we have continued with these particular communities now to work on development. And we designed a project that looks into smart climate resilience. We are looking at drought-resistant crops that can survive during the drought, but also looking not just crops, we are looking at a whole consortium of livelihoods. What are those other livelihoods that the community can engage in? We did an assessment, and we talked more at women than men because we realized that during disaster, it's actually the women who have more problems. Men can walk away from it, but women will have to remain behind with the children. And most of the women that we talked to, and most of the community members we talked to, they said, if there is one thing that when there is floods or there is drought, it will still survive, and that is beekeeping. And we have done a research, and we are working with other stakeholders, suppliers. We have supported the development of a modern beehive that is very friendly to women. We have engaged communities, and at the moment they are developed apiaries. In Africa, traditionally, beehives are hanged on trees. But we realize that when the beehives are hanged on trees, then the women cannot benefit from it. They cannot climb trees to harvest honey or even to hang a hive. So we have designed a project that we have beehives in apiaries within the reach of women, and these have really empowered women to do honey production. We are coordinating collective market and looking at all honey value chain. The Kenya government has picked up this particular project, and now they are supporting our farmers to form cooperatives purposely for collective training, marketing, and getting services that they need. This particular community, when it came to the drought of 2021, we started working with them way back in 2018. We never gave them any relief food. And at the moment, they are stable. They have included other aspects, looking into drought-resistant crops like production of sweet potatoes. We have integrated that with small livestock, keeping of goats and chicken. And that has actually put this community into a stable situation. But what is most important that I would really want to talk about is the community organizing. Community members knowing that they have themselves to do their own development. And what CWS is doing is only facilitating their development. And these communities are actually looking at this as a community investment. CWS intervention is at household level, but we build community structures that last longer than our project time. And these particular communities at the moment, we have trainers of trainers who are coming from this community to go and train some of our project participants away back into places like Marsabit, which is about 500 miles from Tana River. And we appreciate that the community took this initiative seriously.
Yeah, that's a great example of in that area of coming in to respond to the disaster, but then building a structure that helps lasting growth and development happen. Love that. Absolutely love that. Remember, for those that are watching, you can be typing in questions in the chat, and even if all of our hosts or all of our panelists aren't here, some of us will be able to answer those questions. So awesome. Thank you, Mary. Let me ask you one more question, Mary, while I got you. CWS is celebrating 79 years of global impact on this Giving Day. And you've been a part of this somehow for like 20 years of that, I believe, or so. What does that legacy mean to you personally, and how do you see it reflected in the communities that you have the opportunity to serve?
Yes, the 79 years, you have 20 years, part of that, so quite close to the beginning. And I'm happy to say that as an African woman working for CWS, the legacy that I have built over the years, and I leave it behind, and I'm very proud of it, is women empowerment. I took leap of faith just to make that my almost personal business. And I've seen women get enabled, women get involved, and women take the lead. We have seen in areas, I've seen the areas where we implement projects, reduced gender-based violence. And this has not happened overnight. It has not been easy, because in African culture, a woman is supposed to be seen and not to be heard. And when we are talking about communities that are vulnerable and pastoral communities, then that is cultural. So changing culture is not easy. So what we have done over the years, and I have been a champion of this, is using a methodology we call transforming masculinity, where we are focusing on cultural norms, theology, and beliefs that promote gender equity. But the key thing here has been using men as the champions of change. Men doing self-reflection, starting from your household. How do you treat your wife? How do you treat your daughters? How do you react if your wife comes and says something that you don't like? And how will you react when your son says the same thing? Are you giving equal opportunity to your daughters and your sons for education, for health, and for everything? And this has been our program make very huge achievement on gender equity. It's a very relaxed mode of working in a way that you are not judging anyone, you are not asking hard questions, but you are helping the men, women, girls, and boys to do self-reflection. What will happen if I made this change? If my wife, for example, we get to these communities and we do what we call a daily calendar, just to get to understand how many hours does women work and how many hours do men work. And in some communities, women work up to 16 hours and men work up to 4 or 5 hours, even 3 hours. And you look at what type of work do men do and what type of work do women do. And then you look at who controls the resources and who uses the resources. You realize that women use the resources, but the men control the resources. Just putting all that together and then helping the communities, the men, boys, women, and girls to reflect on it has actually given us a very good result. That's one thing I'm very proud of. And the communities respect CWS for that. because other agencies have gone down there and tried to force gender equity things to do this and that. It's not about that. It's about people making the decision that they want to change. And that comes by working with the people. And at this particular point, you have also been able to involve faith leaders in those communities, because faith in Africa is big and everybody either goes to church or a mosque. And if they are going there, then we need to start by transforming the faith leaders. So that is something I'll be very proud of for the rest of my life.
As you should be. I mean, what a beautiful legacy to be a part of. It really, like you say, changing the culture, and the response and the flow of that is it's changed so many women's lives and families' lives in a significant way. So you should be proud of that legacy. And for those of our CWS family that's watching this, if you've been someone involved in giving to CWS in the past, you're a part of that legacy as well, and you can continue to have a part in that legacy through your giving today also. So thank you, Mary, for sharing. That's just absolutely awesome. Zach, I'm going to jump over to you. So as we mentioned, you lead our team in emergency preparedness, response, and recovery in the U.S. Can you tell us a little bit about CWS's emergency response and what maybe makes us different even from some other organizations?
Larry, I appreciate that. And I feel like there's several things that really make us unique. And it's interesting to hear this conversation because it was not scripted. And Larry, like your comments on it's not like what we do, but how we do it. And I feel like you're like reading my notes and you've not seen any of my notes. And just hearing, hearing my colleagues and some of those things, there are a lot of themes that I think carry through. And Catherine touched on this earlier in her opening remarks, right? The collaboration really is at the core of our mission and our history and is really part of our DNA. And so we're always working in partnership within the EPRR program with response to domestic emergencies in the US. And whether that's at the national level or the regional level or the local level, with governmental organizations or our private sector. Again, we're kind of always working in collaboration. And while we do provide immediate relief in the form of CWS kits and blankets, which I think is really important, and I'm sure there are folks on this, that are watching this recording that probably support that program. That's a key part of our response in the US. But we also take the time to really learn about the people we serve and understand their unique needs and respond accordingly, right? I always like to think of us as like a global organization, like this larger organization with a local approach. And I think, again, it goes back to kind of our DNA. And I think that's one of the things that makes us somewhat unique. So our response to disasters doesn't just end at material aid, right? Again, that's an important component, but we really follow through onto recovery in many of these communities, which oftentimes takes, if not years, sometimes even decades, right? And this can look very different in different communities. And so we work hard to tailor our response and our recovery efforts to the needs of that community, right? We might be providing temporary housing support in certain circumstances or cash assistance to help people maybe, restock their refrigerators, right? If the power was out for a while. We've provided cash assistance to migrant farm workers who were out of work for weeks on end and had no other means of supporting themselves during that time frame until the next crop was available for them to harvest. And so we've provided seed money to long-term recovery groups to help them kind of, get on their feet and support their community moving through that long-term response and recovery effort to help rebuild homes and restore lives. And I think one of the other things, just again, going back to that collaborative nature and that DNA is our convening efforts. We work with various stakeholders in different capacities and look at the response from a unique lens as to how do we not only address the immediate, the acute needs, but how do we address the long-term needs, right? So for instance, in North Carolina, we've been collaborating with and helping to convene various groups around issues of affordable housing, right, for disaster survivors, right? But like, how do we address this pre-existing socioeconomic issue in the midst of a disaster, and help this community be better prepared for the future, and help to address that affordable housing issue that now has only been exacerbated since the disaster itself. So those are some of the unique ways, and I could go on, but I think it's just important to note that again, some of these core values that CWS was established on nearly 80 years ago hold true to today.
I love that. And there's so much that you said there, but a couple things that stood out, like that we're a global organization with a local approach. I love that feel. And I love even what you shared that, sometimes it's easy to think in a response, in an emergency response, that the important thing is who's first on the scene. And oftentimes we're one of those that are first on the scene, but more often than not, the bigger issue becomes who's still around, after that initial response. And I love that we're around, coming up with long-term solutions for folks. And so thank you for being a part of that. Again, love it. I love that we get to be a part of that. That's very cool. Very cool. Let me ask you, is there something that the public might not realize about how CWS is responding to emergencies here at home? Anything you'd share on that?
Yeah, I think I would imagine there are probably several things, but I think one of the things that that folks may not realize, hopefully you realize this, we take stewardship really seriously, right? And so that's kind of my just to say that up front. And so one of the things that we've been really leaning into more recently, it's not flashy work, but it's super necessary. And there have been lots and lots of studies that show that investment in preparedness is really crucial, and the return on investment in preparedness is really high, like a 13-to-1 ratio. Like, there's multiple studies out there. So we've been actually focusing much more lately on our preparedness work in a number of different communities, specifically with non-English speaking populations, right? And so we've developed a suite of preparedness videos that have been translated into approximately 8 different languages outside of English. And so we've been trying to get those out into the hands of folks. And the work's not just about, those types of informational resources, even though those are important as well. We've also, in a number of our trainings that we've been conducting, we've been providing preparedness kits, right? Because folks may not necessarily have the financial means to actually go out and purchase the supplies that are necessary, even if they have the information. But I think the one thing that we don't often think about when it comes to preparedness, right? We may think, okay, yeah, that's great to have a go bag. It's great to have a preparedness kit or a shelter-in-place kit, and know your evacuation routes and all those kinds of things, depending on where you live. But one of the things that we're realizing, or not realizing, but I think that we've been trying to stress and help the general public understand, help disaster survivors understand, that this is also a form of psychosocial or psychological first aid, I should say, for people who have experienced a disaster. And so in California right now, from the Southern California wildfires, we're engaging in some additional preparedness work, and just providing that preparedness kit, providing that information, gives people a sense of security as we're going to be entering the next wildfire season in California very shortly. So it's not just about those physical needs, it's also about the psychological support that folks are needing that have already experienced a disaster.
Okay, Zach, I'm just going to confess. I like to think that I know a little bit about all of, but I have not thought about preparedness in that way. Like, I really have not considered that. So that's you're giving me something to really kick around. And so it's great that folks are going to be able to put questions in to dig deeper on that, because I think that'd be interesting to dig a little deeper on that idea that's part of our stewardship, is helping prepare, but it's also part of, like, what you say, like a psychological first aid for folks who've been through some of those disasters. That's really cool. I'm glad that you're leading us in that way, and I'm glad that we can be a part of that. Very cool. Thank you so much. We're going to jump over to Catherine. I have a couple questions for Catherine. So Catherine, in your role overseeing stuff with program, you have the unique vantage point, right, of seeing our our impact on a global scale. And we know that each program we have so many different programs and so many different cultures, and they're different based on those cultures and all that. But how do we ensure, you mentioned earlier that vision, how do we ensure that that gets woven through all those different programs in all those different cultures? How do we keep that continuity?
Thanks, Larry. It's a good question. It's a hard question. And I've been thinking about, as I've been hearing my colleagues speak, I mean, really the answer to that question is our staff are really phenomenal and share the vision and the commitment and the passion. And I think you hear that in what's been shared. It really is a privilege to me to be able to zoom in and out and kind of always, one day speak to Chris about Asia and another to Mary about Africa and Zach here in the US and all of our other colleagues. It is really a gift to be able to see how that is true, that across the world, despite so many differences in programming, so many differences in local contexts, differences in the challenges that people are facing, I think you'd hear common and similar things if you put any group of 4 CWS staff together around partnership and community-led responses and the passion that you hear on this call. I think our staff also are experts not only in the technical areas that are critical to our work, such as case management, climate adaptive agricultural practices, emergency humanitarian food delivery, economic empowerment, some of the other things you've talked about. But I said this before, they're also really highly relational. And I think that's a culture that at CWS we have a number of values, but that include belonging, in the sense that, when you're interacting with us, it needs, humanitarian response has to be human. It has to be rigorous and excellent, and because that is part of our commitment to people as well, that we're delivering programs that work. But you have to know the needs, and so I think there's a real commitment among CWS staff of curiosity and relationship. And when some other things we do, you talked about the continuity across programs. When we talk about our mission, it's easy for us to focus on the what or the when of what we do. So our mission statement includes reference to those things of hunger, poverty, displacement, and disaster. Those are contexts in which we work, so challenges that we seek to address. But our mission statement is longer than just those 4 words. Our mission statement isn't just work on hunger, poverty, displacement, and disaster. It is actually to transform communities through just and sustainable responses to those challenges. So our mission talks about the how. And I think that's really important as we are seeking to make critical decisions, as an organization in these challenging times, as programs. It's to really hone in on thinking about, what does transformation look like and mean? What does justice look like and mean? What does sustainability look like and mean? How do we know if we're moving in those directions? And finally, I think it's easy for hopelessness to seep in these times. It's easy to be daunted when your mission statement is to transform communities and, through just and sustainable responses to some of the hardest challenges and difficulties that we face in the world. And when we see all the challenges that we spoke about earlier unfolding, I think it's easy to see how far we are from our vision, or how long and hard the mission's work is. At the same time, I think those tools, the mission and our vision, they can give us hope. They can reorient us when we face challenges. It can say, well, why are we doing it anyway? Why give when I'm never going to be able to replace $40 million of lost humanitarian aid. What's it all matter? Well, it does. And I think that vision of and holding together as a staff team, an imagination for a world where things are, whole and people are whole and relationships are restored and people have access to the things that they need on a day-to-day basis. That really grounds us, I think, and helps to build kind of continuity and approach across our programs. We do a lot of training. We have some really important tools that help us, like strategic planning tools and evaluation tools that help us know how are we making progress toward these things. But I'd say our staff and our mission and our vision are really helpful in making the work that we do possible.
Yeah, I just so agree with everything you said. Like I've seen that lived out, right? I've seen leaders like yourself who are passionate about that mission and vision and pass it on to the staff. These highly, like you say, these highly skilled experts, but making sure that we are clinging to that mission and that vision, and that drives everything we do. So yeah, awesome. I love that it's not, let's just get some results. It's here's how we're going to do it, and we're going to do this in a just and sustainable way. That's beautiful. So thank you. So you touched on this a little bit, but there's so many headlines with the U.S. government pulling out of the business of humanitarian assistance. So why would you say it's critical for us to continue the work that we do, and even to expand on that?
Sure. I don't want to be, we're talking about big things, big problems, things across the world, like maybe problems in locations that some people listening haven't heard of before, or locations, communities that are unfamiliar. And I think it's easy to sometimes, again, like I said, feel daunted, or just kind of like, well, how do you engage with this, but the reason is that there is immense need and that people are suffering. So why is it important to continue this work, advance this work? You've heard the stories of impact on this call, and those are really motivating. I think behind that is just the reality that these programs are still really necessary. We've achieved so much, and there's so much more to do. There will continue to be earthquakes. There will continue to be fires. There will continue to be challenges of social dynamics that make it difficult for certain groups of people, whether women, as Mary's talked about, or people with disabilities, or any children, as Chris talked about in Indonesia, to thrive and to access the things they need to survive. And so that need confronts us daily. We see it in the news, we read it, we experience it in our own lives. These things aren't really abstract. We know we rely on each other. Like I rely on people in my life to care for my family and put food on the table. And we're all interconnected in this world, whether we acknowledge it, whether we always know it. And I think that this work not only recognizes that reality, but makes sure that people have the connections and the support that they need to live well and the way that we want for everyone. So immense need and growing need. And in that context, I think our work and the work of nonprofit, like civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, when that work in coalition and partnership, are just really critical.
Yeah, I love you said that these needs aren't abstract. Like it's easy to get numb to that a little bit, but to realize these are real needs and real people, and we have real opportunities to do something about it. So thanks for your leadership, and thanks for sharing that. I want to do one last thing while I've got you all here together. A little speed round, right? It's just a quick answer from each of you on this. But if you could give our Giving Day audience one image of impact that would inspire them to give, what would that one image of impact be? And Chris, do you want to go first?
Thanks, Larry. I'll give it a go. Yeah, I'm already smiling because I'm thinking of this place which I get to go to. I'm not going to say where it is because the community, it's a community that's struggling because it's in a place where the outside is hostile and they're not regarded as being legally present where they are. But we support an organization from that community, and we support them to run safe houses for community members. And it's this place, it's the end of a street, so it's the dead end of a street. and they've rented houses on either side of the street. So they've got the whole end of the street. And some of these houses are for women, and some are for women with children, and some are for families. And they're places of safety, and they have relationships with the local authorities, and the authorities are okay with them. And they teach sewing classes and human rights and other fantastic things. And they provide trauma support and childcare. And they've just opened a community farm where refugee women go to work on their own farm that they run in their own control, making their own hours, and where they feed their families, and where the surplus from those farms goes into refugee schools. And the most amazing thing is they've created a community. They've created this community of people that wouldn't otherwise exist. And that couldn't exist without CWS. We were there from the beginning. We have provided funding. When the donor pulled out, we carried on funding so that those safe houses stayed open. That's what CWS does. And that's what I think impact is.
Wow. Thank you, Chris. For those who are watching this and are on the fence of whether or not you will give, okay, you hear that. Seriously. And for those who've already decided how much you want to give, rethink it. It's my opinion. Anyway, rethink that amount. It might need to be more. Mary, I'd love for you to share kind of a lasting image of impact that would inspire the audience.
Thank you, Larry. The impact I want to share and the request I would make is CWS is investing a lot in climate resilient programming. And I would really request that we get to a point where we enable more people to be in charge at any given time. If it's emergency, if it's recovery, if it's early, if it's sustainable development, they need to be in a position where they can be able to get to a sustainable climate change resilient programming. And I want to tell the viewers this. For CWS to be able to do that is a cycle that can take between 5 to 10 years. So we are looking forward for long-term funding and good amount of resources to be able to take communities there, because climate change will always be with us, and the people who are affected most are the most vulnerable people in our society. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. And I love that this isn't just a theory, but we've been doing this, and we've got proven techniques, and we've got experts, and funding is the thing that would help move this forward. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Mary. Appreciate it. And Zach, why don't you jump in on that question?
Thanks, Larry. I'm going to take this a little bit of a different direction. I think we've heard lots of amazing images of impact. And so I'm going to provide less of an inspiring image of impact and more of a challenge, right? I think for most of us, myself included, right, we oftentimes have this like false sense of security. As Larry mentioned, I live in Pennsylvania. Over the past 30 years in Pennsylvania alone, 94% of the reported flooding was not in flood zones, right? And so we think about even like Asheville, North Carolina. We all know what happened there with Hurricane Helene, and Asheville, North Carolina is listed as like a climate haven. And so I certainly hope that like nobody who's watching this right now, this reporting, ever experiences a natural disaster, but the odds are that several of you who are watching it already have. And so what I would like to challenge our audience on is really for each of you, not only to prepare yourselves, but also to pay it forward, to take a moment to just stop and reflect on what it would look like to have your livelihood, your place of employment, your loved ones taken away from you at a moment's notice, and think about how you would want to be treated and supported in kind of like your greatest time of need. And I know that's a heavy lift to ask us to stop our busy lives and literally take 5-10 minutes to kind of like put ourselves in someone else's shoes. But I think it's really important, and it's something that can be very grounding. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. Thank you, Larry, for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. Thanks for that challenge to think of it in that way. That's challenging to me personally. So thank you. Appreciate that. Catherine, an image of impact that you'd want to share?
Sure. So Larry, I think you asked an image of impact from the last year, and I've been reflecting this year more in different ways on family because I had a daughter about a year ago. And when I think about our work, and there's so many ways to look at our work, but I'm so often reflecting on the way that we have helped families stay together or reunite or live more in harmony with each other. And one, over the course of the last year, we have helped thousands of families to reunite across borders. And I've always been most often moved by those stories, and this year even more. So I think it's also an example of where the current situation is really challenging, that some of the refugees, as Mary talked about, that had been booked for travel to the US in January when the program was suspended, remain now separated from family, separated children, separated from their parents, loved ones separated from others. And we see that not only in this context, but in many others. And so I think I've been just personally particularly moved by those stories this year. And I think the work that we do to reunite families and to support people when they're still waiting for that reunification is really critical, and an example of CWS being present in some of the most joyous and some of those painful parts of life. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for couching it in that idea of the family. Yeah, that hits home. That hits home for sure for me. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're at the end of our discussion here. Let me just say, I thought this was going to be good, but I had no idea. Like this was an awesome conversation. I'm so proud to be a part of CWS and so proud to be affiliated with you four. You guys are great leaders, and thank you so much for taking time. I know there's probably folks that are watching live who are putting in the chat some high fives or kudos or other follow-up questions, and we'll get to those in the live time. But for now, thank you guys for what you do. Thanks for your service. Thanks for your care, your compassion, your expertise. I love that the CWS staff that I get to rub shoulders with are some of the best and brightest, and you guys are a great example of that. So thank you for this time, and now we'll cut back to the live stream. All right, here we are back live. I told you guys you were in for a treat. Those were some fantastic answers to those questions, some great stories. Loved that. Mary and Chris were not able to be with us. They're sleeping somewhere on the other side of the world right now. But Zach and Catherine are with us live here as well. And we want to just take a few more minutes and just see if there's a few other questions that we want to answer and that we could answer. Zach, there was a question about how we make decisions on what to respond to when and some of that. Can you go ahead and jump in on that question, Zach?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it's one that we get asked a lot, right? Because there are so many disasters that are happening within the US and obviously globally as well. And a lot that don't really make the national news. And so the one thing I would say is that it's not an exact science. And so, I've been in this field for 20 years. And the one thing that folks need to remember is every disaster is different and every community is different. And so therefore, every response needs to be unique and tailored specifically for that community. And so one of the things that we do initially, right, is we assess whether or not we have local partners in the area, whether that's our denominational partners or partners through other networks. We join coordination calls to find out who's doing what, where, when, and how. And those help inform the decisions that we make around where we're going to respond. And we look for gaps. I think that's one of the things that we do really well is filling gaps in services and looking at unique ways to fill those gaps, and whether or not we have local, national, or regional partners that can help fill those gaps and kind of work alongside us in coordination. So, but last but not least, and this is a big part of it, right, is funding, right? Do we have financial support to go into a community and work in a community? And some of that comes down to being able to have the ability to respond to events that maybe are low attention disasters. So often the money follows the media when it comes to disasters. And so when folks give to like our emergency response fund, it allows the staff who are uniquely positioned, subject matter experts, and have these connections and are coordinating with other organizations to be able to make those crucial decisions as to whether or not to respond to one disaster versus another disaster based on the needs and the gaps that exist.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure those are hard decisions to make and hard waters to navigate when so much is going on so quickly. And so thank you for stepping in that way with that expertise. I think there was a question. Oh, look, there's a question right there. And Catherine, this might be a good question for you to answer. It says, I have a question about refugees resettling in the U.S. What kind of support does CWS provide during their initial arrival, and how does that support evolve after their first 90 days?
Sure. Thanks, Larry. And hi, everybody. It's a good question. And I could talk about it for a long time, so I won't do that. I'll try to be brief. CWS supports refugees after their initial arrival really in ways that are tailored to what they need. So people come with all different kinds of, expertise and needs and connections or not. So we do our best to make sure that people receive sort of core services that everyone needs: airport pickup, a hot meal when they first arrive, assistance to identify housing, to get settled in their community, enroll children in school, figure out where to shop for groceries, just all the info that you'd need any time you're moving to a new country in general. And that's pretty standard. And then we work more closely with people throughout those first 90 days and on an ongoing basis when they need additional support. The approach and modalities also really vary city to city, location to location. We're often connecting people with other organizations and other resources in their local communities to help them integrate and get settled, learn English, find a job. So really everything that people need to get set up. It is a rapid self-sufficiency program. That sounds kind of jargony, but it means it's designed to help people get up and running quickly and contribute to their communities quickly. And we see that happening. It's really incredible, I think, how quickly, and a testament to the community's resilience and, people's just innate skills and experiences and determination that we see around the world in our programs, people in all communities, and that we see certainly for refugees when they're arriving in the States.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Here's another question. CWS used to work through local churches and faith-based organizations, Mennonites, Brethren, Quakers, Presbyterians, and Methodists. Is this still true? Our U.S. crop walks raise funds through churches. And probably both of you have some insight to like what it looks like for congregations or memberships to work with us. Catherine, do you want to talk first about that?
Sure. Thanks for the question. It is a resounding yes. We still do and love to work through and with, really alongside local churches and faith-based organizations in our work. Again, so much of what that looks like the flavor of those relationships and the partnerships and what we do together varies so much according to what the needs are that we're trying to address. But yeah, across our regions and offices, we work really closely with church partners. CWS as an institution also has institutional level partnerships with a number of churches, including several on that list. We were founded by a number of churches that came together to do work together in the world. We remain in covenant partnership, we call it, with a number of congregations and churches. And we
are deeply connected in a lot of other ways to communities of faith, including other communities of faith outside of Christian ones too. But yeah, those partnerships with some of those that you named are really near and dear to us, and happy to, Zach, you probably have some more examples of that from the work in your field.
Awesome. Yeah, Zach, do you have, you want to comment on that?
I don't have a whole lot to add what Catherine mentioned, but yes, as Catherine noted, it is a definite yes. Particularly within the Emergency Preparedness, Response, and Recovery Program, we work very closely with all the organizations you mentioned right there, as well as many others that have a deep-rooted connection to Church World Service. We convene many of those organizations on a monthly call, and oftentimes have specialty calls specific to certain topics related to domestic disaster response and recovery work. There's a lot of collaboration that happens within those meetings. And then in the field as well, right? Where we're responding, we will often work together with those particular groups as well as their local churches. So yes, and I can say personally, this is one of the reasons I work for Church World Service. I used to work for Brethren Disaster Ministries, and I grew up in the Church of the Brethren tradition, and had also worked for United Church of Christ Disaster Ministries. And so, again, that was one of my early introductions to Church World Service, was because of that relational piece that was talked about in the recording by my colleagues, and how we work in collaboration and partnership with others. And that really does start at the local level with a lot of our local churches.
That's great. Yeah, that's something we aren't going to abandon anytime soon. Ever, actually. Hey, thank you guys for taking time. Oops, we have some other. Oh, we do have another question. Tangible ways people watching today can support CWS in addition to donating. Well, donating is a great one. We don't want to overlook that, and I'll have a few comments on that. Let me just make a couple comments on that. People can do things like advocate with members of Congress. That's something that we still strongly encourage. And we think is very useful right now. People can volunteer at a local office if they have an office in their town. They can raise funds through a crop hunger walk, and you can go online and find out where those are. If you aren't connected with a crop hunger walk already, your congregation or local group of people can assemble kits that are used in disaster response. You can sign the ecumenical declaration that we have. You can pray for us and for our work. You can start your own fundraiser. You can share our work with your friends. Even share this live stream with your friends and invite them to join with us. There are so many ways. And if you go to our website, CWSglobal.org, you can find out about all these different ways that you can be involved beyond just giving. But since it is Giving Day, let me just conclude with a couple things. One, thanks, Catherine and Zach, for jumping on here again and for your involvement in the conversation earlier in the week. And we're gonna try to wrap it up after 79 minutes, because it's our 79th anniversary that we're celebrating. Go figure. Let me just say that if you share this vision that we've been talking about, this world where all have food, voice, and a safe place to call home, like, I really firmly believe that there's no better place that you can give. There are other great organizations doing great work, but I believe in my heart there's no better place that you can give to live that out. If that's something that's important to you and you feel you're called to live out, I believe giving to Church World Service is a phenomenal investment. And I back that up through my own giving. I'm an employee for Church World Service, but each month I give some of my salary back to CWS. I'm a monthly donor because I believe in the work, and I want to continue that work and further that work through my giving. And in fact, after we had the pre-recorded conversation the other morning, as soon as we ended that conversation, I went on the Giving Day website and I gave again, because I believe in this work wholeheartedly. I've seen it firsthand. We have 79 years of experience of working in partnership, of having proven effective strategies, providing long-term solutions, having faith-based, compassionate action, reaching the most underserved and overlooked populations, having a local impact and a global impact at the same time. I mean, all these things together, I am just convinced that we as an organization have been created and developed for such a time as this. And I believe that you who are listening to this right now, it may not be by accident that you're here listening to this, but it may be that you have been blessed and positioned for such a time as this also, to join with us in the way that you're able to join with us, that people around the world don't have the opportunities and don't have the resources to do this work like you do. And so I want to encourage you to continue to consider giving, and possibly monthly giving, possibly a variety of different ways to give. Our goal today is to raise $100,000. We currently are at a little over $48,000 raised. And so we still have a lot to go, but we believe in where we're going, and we believe we can get there. We're at 48,900, almost 49,000. So we would ask and challenge you to consider helping us move toward that. I want to also, just even as we're wrapping up here, we're at the end of the time, I want to put in the chat here. Whoops, I am not going to put in the chat. I'm putting in the wrong chat. Let me see. I'm going to put in the chat my personal cell number. I want to, if you have questions about ways to give, if you would like to make a gift out of your, I cannot get this in the chat. Here we go. Join the chat. Nope, I haven't figured out how to do that. Someone put my cell number in the chat, please. I don't know how to do the chat. It is 517-582-8462. Again, 517-582-8462. If you have questions about maybe gifts of stock or giving out of your IRA or other ways to give, I would love to engage with you about that and have that conversation with you as well. So thank you to our panelists. Thanks for everybody behind the scenes. Thank you for those that are watching. Appreciate you, and blessings to you today. Thank you. We're going to close out with a little video.
May 1st is Church World Services Giving Day. We invite you to participate. We invite you to give resources so that we can address disasters both here in the U.S. and around the world.
It's important to support CWS so that our impact will grow, because we put resources where they're most needed, at the community level, at the family level. And that's where we work, that's where our staff are, that's where our organizations are, that's where our partners are.
Join us.
Join us.
Imina Ani.
Join us.
Hãy cùng chúng tôi.
Join us.
We can make a difference.